Hey Year 12s, how are you? I thought I'd just do a quick video on your written explanation, which is a key part of the SAC, as well as go through a few things that I think you guys can clear up in your creative writing stories. Um, yes, I'm wearing braids and I look like a child, but let's just move past that, and hopefully that means when I'm 40, I'll look like I'm 30. Um, okay, cool. Um, Also, just excuse the fact that it's not like a enlarged PowerPoint because I don't know, something's wrong with my recording thing, and it's working better this way. Okay, cool. So, what is a written explanation? With your creative writing story that you will be writing up next week, like writing up your good copy, you also need to have a written explanation. What it is, and this is straight from VCAR, it is an insightful justification of ideas related to selected content and approach made during the creative process, demonstrating meaningful connections to the original text and complex understanding of purpose, audience, and context. This is important, Year 12s. Basically, it is a justification of why you are writing what you are writing. Why have you chose it? Why did you choose it? There needs to be a point to your story, and there needs to be a purpose to all the creative writing techniques you use, how you've structured the story. We actually want to see that you have thought through and you have made decisions about all of these, and that's really, really important. And so your written explanation is just basically you saying why you are doing what you are doing. What purpose does it have? Okay. If I go next, hopefully next here. Actually, it doesn't. Okay. Go next. Okay. So your written explanation is structured, and you have to kind of tick off three things. Firstly, the purpose. What ideas or message are you trying to convey? This is the main point of your story because you have essentially taken the time to write this 1,000-word thing. There needs to be a point to it, otherwise, it's not going to be very good. So we have covered quite a few themes in Kate Kennedy's short story. We have been looking at, if I scroll up, we have been looking at conflict. We've looked at insight. We're looking at communication. We've looked at change. We've looked at connection and compassion. We have looked at forgiveness, tenderness, and vulnerability. We've looked at different kinds of relationships. We've looked at the role of mothers. We've looked at miscarriages. We've looked at new mothers. We've looked at mothers and protective instincts. We've looked at masculinity and problems with masculinity. We've looked at children and their relationships with their parents. We've looked at partners. We've looked at the role of work and people injuring their bodies. We've looked at the domestic settings and how some families are not great, like in 72 Derwents. So we have actually looked at quite a few key ideas and themes. Let me just bring up this PowerPoint. I want you to be able to say clearly, well, what ideas are you looking at and what message are you trying to convey? Now, this can be pretty similar to Kate Kennedy's messages, but the key thing I want you to remember here is you need to have something new to add, like a different piece of insight that is not already in that story. And hence, that's why you are writing a whole new bit to that story. Yeah, so if you chose to write from Frank's wife's perspective, or if you choose to write from Claire's perspective, or if you are writing from the perspective of Ellie, what new idea or insight do you actually have to tell us? And obviously, you think that is important because you have chosen to write it for your creative piece. So really think about this, guys. What actually are you trying to convey? And why do you think it's so important? Like, why do you think it's so new and insightful? And if you want to kind of workshop it with me and message me and say to me something, this is the purpose of my story, message me. That'll be really easy for me to clarify or make it clearer. Yeah. So that's the first part of your written explanation. The second bit is the context. So, what short story or short stories are you drawing from? And what connections to these short stories are you making? So, with that, I just want you to be really detailed and specific. So, which short story, but more specifically, what character are you drawing from? Which scene are you going from? Why did you choose that particular scene? What background information does a reader need? And what kind of enabled you to make your decision there? And lastly, the third part is the audience. So you are writing this story with a message that you want to impact the audience, right? And you want the audience to feel a certain way and think about certain ideas while they are reading that story. If they're not, it's not a very effective story. A story needs to be able to make someone feel something or think about something. And that is what you are aiming to do here. So, what language or literary devices and language features have you chosen to use, and what impact are you trying to have on the audience by using them? So basically, we know this is what you are trying to convey. I've got a message to convey. But how are you going to convey that? You're going to convey that through your language, right? So you need to be clear. If this is what I'm trying to convey, how am I going to get there? And we've gone through a lot on how Kate Kennedy achieves this. A lot of the time, it's similes and metaphors. It's in descriptive language. It's in really describing the scene. It's in how the story moves so that the ending is always a moment of insight or a moment of connection. Because that is a point to a lot of her stories. She wants to showcase the connection. Yeah, so that becomes important here. So basically 3 things, so you can keep that as a checklist that you have to tick off. Now, we've got a sample written explanation here. I'm just going to slightly see if I can move this box. Okay, hopefully that makes it, maybe not. Hopefully this makes it better to read. Okay, so this is a written explanation someone did last year, I think. And so it needs to be like 2 paragraphs. I've put this on your resources. You're more than welcome to use this as a little bit of a guide. And you can use I in written explanation because it's from you as the author. So, in this story, I aim to explore the feeling of vulnerability and frustration that underpins the relationships in many of Kennedy's stories. In particular, I would like to explore the experience of Marie in Static, who is depicted to be an antagonist. So, her key message here that this person wanted to convey is vulnerability and frustration. Now, ideally, I'd like you to go into detail about, the cause of vulnerability and frustration and the consequence of that, because we've really talked about cause and consequence a lot in this unit. So, yes, but this is the key idea that she wants to convey. So let's keep going. So now she's going on to the context. And she's also going to talk a little bit about her ideas and message in there. The scene I will focus on during Christmas lunch with the family. where Marie is hosting her mother and his sister-in-law. In Static, Anthony sees Marie and his mother to give off evil rays of hatred towards each other, while he's seemingly and unfairly caught in the middle. I would like to show how, from Marie's perspective, her mother-in-law's poor attitude enhances her own insecurities and makes her constantly feel she is not worthy enough for this family or for Anthony. These insecurities include her inability to have children, her inability to please her mother-in-law in terms of home decor or food selection. She, as a consequence, feels like she's working so hard and is underappreciated and is bitter and frustrated towards Anthony, who seems unable to make her feel good and is not willing to defend her in front of her mother-in-law. She is tirelessly determined to give Anthony a child and is monitoring every aspect of conception that's in her control. Anthony, however, seems to be passive and unappreciative again, and Marie once again despairs that she's trying so hard, while meanwhile Anthony does not even know what he wants. She consequently thinks of him as immature and not ready to be a man. I will aim to also show a moment of vulnerability towards the end, where Marie completely lets go of everything she's trying to control and reaches out to Anthony. Kennedy's endings seem to highlight the importance of compassion and kindness to reforge relationships, and I would like to explore how Anthony and Marie's stories, despite seeming to be pessimistic, can perhaps provide some hope. So this is a context bit, but can you see how this person has included the cause of the vulnerability and frustration that Marie's experiencing, and also the consequence that she just decides to let it go at the end and be compassionate. So those are key messages of Kennedy's story. I really like this idea. Hold on, I think I've just copied and pasted something. Because the insight that this person wants to show is new. She is arguing that Marie is not just a control freak. She is actually so determined to make this family happy. She is just trying her absolute best in everything. And she's actually gone unappreciated by Anthony, who's actually pretty passive throughout the whole thing. So that's a great idea to kind of explore. And then the last bit is the audience bit. So what techniques are you using, and why are you, how is that going to influence this audience? The techniques I will be using include vivid imagery, similes, and metaphors. Kate Kennedy uses this in plenty to distill the experience to her readers and enable her readers to visualize complex emotions in different ways. I would like to also explore the idea of motifs using the food Marie makes to represent her and Anthony's relationship. I aim to play on the word static to represent and show the fact that Anthony is always distracted and never present, like the static in a phone, when Marie needs him. I aim to cut back and forth between different scenes and memories that show Marie's train of thought as she reflects over their relationship. This is important to capture how her past regrets and future anxieties contribute to her experience. Lastly, I will use dialogue to show the hostility and frustration in their relationship. So this person has touched on like 4 or 5 of Kate Kennedy's techniques, and that's what I want you guys to do as well. Not just one, we've looked at heaps. And you've had heaps of time to draft your SAC, so there's no reason why you cannot include a few techniques. The main thing is, one important thing, guys, is the reason for these similes, metaphors, and vivid imagery. The reason why she has put in so much time to find different ways of showing these relationships in similes and metaphors is because she wants us to kind of conceptualize that experience. How does it feel? She talks about flexion and the inability, flexion is bending in a relationship. And she compares that to Frank being really stubborn, but then at the end, their elbows flex together, and that's how they connected again. So she's actually showing us how A relationship is like a muscle, and needs to be worked upon. It needs to bend in order to meet the other person's needs. Is that not like such a complex idea just being shown in a really simple way? That is the power of a good simile or metaphor. We are able to understand how it feels, because we know what a muscle is and we know what flexing is, and that way we can understand a complex idea of a relationship dynamic. Okay, so this is a written explanation, and then hopefully I'll just do another video